Listen closely because you need to grasp the full reality of what just took place at the Rafah crossing. For the first time in nearly 2 years, the sealed border between Gaza and Egypt finally cracked open. Exactly 15 Palestinians crossed into Egypt. 15 people. Compare that to the 20,000 who are desperate for life-saving medical care. Compare it to the 80,000 waiting to return to their homes. But that number isn't the real story here. The real story is why this specific crossing is so critical right now and what it reveals about the fragile ceasefire Donald Trump claims he engineered. Because while the cameras are focused on ambulances rolling through Rafah, Iran is issuing threats that could ignite the entire Middle East. Visualize the scene. It is Sunday morning, February 1st, 2026, at the Rafah border. The Egyptian side. Humanitarian aid trucks are backed up as far as the eye can see. Ambulances sit waiting with their engines idling. For the first time, Palestinian security officers in fresh uniforms are manning the checkpoint. European Union monitors are deploying their equipment. On the other side, Israeli security forces watch every move, and separating them is a 2.5-kilometer corridor cutting through Israeli-controlled territory. A literal no man's land. Palestinians are forced to walk this distance on foot just to get from Gaza to Egypt. This isn't just a border opening. This is theater. This is every player trying to prove they are honoring Trump's deal while giving up the absolute minimum. I'm Herrick McCain. Welcome to Firepoint. If you want the raw truth without the filter, make sure you subscribe to the channel right now, because the information I am about to break down connects two stories that look separate but are actually gears in the same dangerous machine operating across the Middle East. The opening of Rafah and the escalation with Iran. It is all connected, and understanding the link changes everything. Let's get to the reality of what happened at Rafah. The headlines are celebrating this as a major step toward peace in Gaza. They talk about medical evacuations beginning and people finally getting treatment, but that is a distraction. The reality is that Israel seized this crossing in May 2024. They have controlled it for 20 months. They only agreed to open it now because Trump's ceasefire agreement demanded it. This isn't about humanitarian aid. This is about tactical leverage. Israel controls exactly who enters and who leaves. They built reinforced concrete walls topped with razor wire. They installed high-tech security scanners. And they force everyone to walk that 2.5-kilometer gauntlet through territory they hold. Why? Because they are determined to ensure this crossing can never be used to move weapons or fighters again. But what isn't being said is that they also want to ensure they hold leverage over Egypt and maintain a stranglehold on Gaza's borders even after a peace deal is signed. If you don't understand why Rafah is the pivot point, look at the map. Gaza has 5 crossings. 4 lead to Israel. Rafah is the single gateway to Egypt. Before the war, this was the lifeline to the outside world. It was how people got to hospitals, universities, and families abroad. When Israel seized it in May 2024, they severed that artery. For 20 months, unless you were evacuated through an Israeli crossing, you were trapped. 20,000 Palestinians need medical care that simply does not exist in Gaza anymore. Hospitals are rubble. Equipment is destroyed. Specialists are gone. These are cancer patients, people needing dialysis, complex surgeries. If they don't get out, they die. So when the announcement came that Rafah was opening, those 20,000 people thought help had arrived. Let's track the timeline. On January 31st, Israel announces a pilot run to test the logistics. They claim no people will cross, just a test of security protocols. Egyptian officials send Palestinian officers through to the Gaza side. They link up with EU monitors. But no civilians move. It is all a rehearsal. Then, on February 1st, the official opening is declared. Limited traffic in both directions. Israel states that 50 patients a day can leave, each with 2 family members, and 50 displaced people can return. That sounds reasonable until you do the math. 20,000 people need to leave. At a rate of 50 per day, that is 400 days. over a year just to clear the urgent medical cases. And the 80,000 waiting to return? At 50 a day, that is 1,600 days. 4.5 years. This isn't an open border. This is a bottleneck designed and controlled by Israel. First, every name needs Israeli security clearance. That isn't a rubber stamp. It is a vetting process that can drag on for weeks. Israel decides who is sick enough to leave. Second, they have to navigate that corridor, on foot, even patients on stretchers or in wheelchairs. No vehicles are permitted except a handful of ambulances. Why? Security. Israel fears vehicles could hide contraband. Third, Egypt has to agree to take them. The Egyptian Health Ministry says they have prepped 150 hospitals. But the paperwork and coordination are a nightmare. And fourth, there is zero agreement on humanitarian aid. People might be crossing, but supplies are not. The UN says Gaza needs 600 trucks a day. Right now, 0 trucks are crossing at Rafah. Everything is still routed through Israeli checkpoints in the north. Then came the statistic that exposed the reality. By the evening of February 1st, exactly 15 people had crossed. 15. The World Health Organization confirmed it. 5 patients, mostly young men, plus their companions. That is it. Not 50, not 20, 15. Israel mentioned another group returning to Gaza, but the numbers are vague. Why so few? Because the system is designed to be slow. Israel is throttling the flow. This is a pressure valve, not a solution. They opened Rafah just enough to claim compliance with Trump's deal, just enough to silence international critics, but not enough to change the reality for the thousands trapped inside. Here is what this means for Gaza on the ground. The war supposedly ended with Trump's ceasefire in October. We are 3.5 months into this truce. Yet, Gaza remains a ruin. 2 years of bombing erased entire cities. 71,000 Palestinians died during the conflict. Hundreds more have died since the ceasefire began because there is no medicine, no power, and barely any water. And now Israel has announced they will terminate the operations of Doctors Without Borders in Gaza by February 28th. The reason? The organization refused to hand over lists of their Palestinian staff. Israel calls it security. MSF calls it a danger to their employees. So Israel is expelling one of the last functioning medical groups while simultaneously opening Rafah at a pace that will take years to clear the waiting list. But here is where the situation gets historically dangerous. While the world watches Rafah, Iran is issuing threats that could drag the region back into total war. And this time, American forces are in the crosshairs. Last week, the Speaker of Iran's parliament, Mohammad Bakr Kalibaf, issued a stark warning. He stated that if the United States strikes Iran, both Israel and all American military bases, centers, and ships in the region will be legitimate targets. Not just Israel, American troops, the 50,000 personnel stationed in the Middle East. He went further, stating Iran will not wait to be hit. They will act preemptively based on any sign of a threat. That is a first strike warning. Why is Iran escalating now? Because Trump has been threatening to bomb Iran for weeks. It began with protests inside Iran in early January. The Iranian people launched the largest anti-government demonstration since 2022. The regime crushed them. Activists report at least 116 dead. The internet was cut. Phones were silenced. Trump tweeted his support for the protesters and threatened to bomb the regime to protect them. Tehran doubled down. The Attorney General warned that protesters would be charged as enemies of God, which carries the death penalty. Trump responded by flooding the Persian Gulf with firepower. Aircraft carriers, destroyers, submarines, B-52 bombers. Reports from major outlets indicate Trump has been presented with strike options targeting not just military sites, but government buildings and symbolic targets in Tehran. Some analysts say this is classic Trump leverage, making massive threats to force a deal, and there is logic to that. He wants a new nuclear agreement. He wants Iran to stop enrichment, dismantle its missile program, and cut off its proxies, in exchange for sanctions relief and investment. But that ignores recent history. Iran already tried negotiating. After the 12-day war in June 2025, there was a ceasefire. Trump demanded talks. Iran sent its foreign minister. They met in Oman and Rome. The talks failed. Trump demanded total capitulation on enrichment. Iran refused. Trump demanded they scrap their missiles. Iran said those missiles are their only defense. Trump demanded they abandon Hezbollah and Hamas. Iran refused. The talks collapsed. Israel bombed Iranian nuclear sites in June. The U.S. joined in. Iran fired back at American bases in Qatar. Then Trump brokered a ceasefire. That was June. It is now February. Nothing has been solved. Both sides are just angrier and more heavily armed. So what happens next? Watch for these indicators. Is there a meeting in Ankara this week between Steve Witkoff and Iranian officials? Turkey and Qatar are trying to set it up. If it happens, diplomacy is still alive. If it fails, we are looking at military strikes within weeks. Trump operates on his own clock. He needs a win. He will either get a deal or he will order a strike. In the medium term, watch the nuclear program. The IAEA reports Iran has record stockpiles of military-grade uranium. Russia is funding new reactors. If Israel convinces Trump that Iran is weeks away from a bomb, Trump will hit them. And this time, the strikes will be massive. Listen to Israeli officials. If they start talking about existential clocks ticking, that is the pre-game show for an attack. My assessment is this: Trump wants a deal, but he demands total victory. Iran cannot give him that without destroying their own regime. So we are in a standoff where both sides are screaming about war while whispering about talks that are likely doomed. Best case? Intermediaries broker a face-saving deal. Iran freezes enrichment and accepts inspections. Trump lifts some sanctions. Everyone claims they won. The region stays tense but avoids fire. Middle case? Negotiations drag, Trump gets impatient, and orders limited strikes. Iran hits back proportionately. A new, messy ceasefire is signed. Worst case? Talks collapse. Trump launches a full-scale air campaign to destroy the nuclear program and the regime. Iran unleashes everything. Proxies attack shipping in the Red Sea. Hezbollah fires on Israel. Hamas breaks the ceasefire. Oil prices skyrocket. The global economy panics. And we are in a regional war that lasts for months. Watch specifically for this. Does Iran deploy the 1,000 strategic drones they announced last week? That is a signal. Are U.S. bases going to high alert? That means intelligence sees an incoming attack. What does the Supreme Leader say? If his rhetoric shifts to martyrdom, he is prepping his people for war. And most importantly, does Trump meet Iranian officials directly? If he does, a deal is possible. If he uses messengers, the gap is too wide. This impacts more than just the Middle East. It hits your wallet. Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz. 20% of the world's oil flows through there. If they close it or start sinking tankers, gas prices explode. Inflation returns. Russia and China are watching. China needs that oil. Russia supports Iran. If the U.S. strikes, Russia could supply advanced air defenses or satellite data to Tehran. Europe is scrambling. French forces defended Israel in June. Will they get dragged in again? And what does this say about American power? If Trump strikes and fails to stop the program, American deterrence is broken. And here is what history will record, not the technical specs of centrifuges. History will remember whether Trump's strategy of maximum pressure prevented a war or caused one. Because we have seen this movie before. Pressure didn't stop the nuclear program last time. It accelerated it. The June war didn't disarm Iran. They are rebuilding. At some point, we have to ask if force can actually solve this problem, or if we are just trapped in a cycle of violence. Now, bring it back to Rafah, because the connection is vital. Why is Israel opening the border now? Because Trump's deal required it. Why does the deal matter? Because it is the foundation of his entire Middle East strategy. Gaza is the test case. Ceasefire, reconstruction, new governance. It is supposed to be the model, but it is failing. Hamas is still in power. The technocratic government hasn't taken over because Israel won't let them in. Netanyahu doesn't trust them. So the ceasefire holds on paper, but the reality is stagnation. On Saturday, Israel launched some of the heaviest airstrikes since the truce began. 30 dead. Israel claimed it was retaliation for a clash in Rafah. A violation, they called it. But they hit residential zones. Israel is gambling that Trump won't stop them because he needs them to help handle Iran. That is the leverage. As long as Iran is the bigger threat, Netanyahu knows he can do whatever he wants in Gaza. Which brings us back to those 15 people. The crossing is open for the cameras. But for the people of Gaza, nothing has changed. The connection is credibility. If Trump's Gaza deal collapses, if Rafah remains a bottleneck, if people keep dying, his threats to Iran look weak. Why would Tehran fear a man who can't even get his allies to stop shooting? But if Trump strikes Iran while Gaza is burning, it proves he relies on force, not deals. And that is a dangerous signal when your opponent is ready to fire back. That is the real story. That is the invisible line connecting the opening of Rafah to the threats from Tehran. Rafah is theater to show progress. Iran's threats are a warning against American overconfidence. Trump is trying to pressure everyone into a deal, but he is running out of cards. 15 people crossed a border. That isn't a victory. That is a symbol. And if Iran calls Trump's bluff, we will find out if his strategy has any solid ground to stand on. If this breakdown helped you see the full board, smash that like button and subscribe to Fire Point. The story is moving fast. Trump is pushing for a win. Iran is betting on survival. And civilians are caught in the middle. Let me know in the comments. Should the U.S. launch a strike to stop a nuclear Iran, or is diplomacy the only way out? I'm Herrick McCain, and I'll see you in the next video.